Linda stood by the old Ford, keys clutched, yelling about the woman in Memphis. The small-town diner hushed, every eye on me. She tossed my suitcase onto the cracked asphalt, scattering clothes across the parking lot. "You're nothing but a cheat, Dale," she hissed, her voice cutting through the sudden quiet. Dale Peterson stared at his phone, the screen still bright with Brenda Olson's message. "Good to see you settled in, stranger. Heard you've been singing." The words felt both casual and loaded, a familiar thread from his recent past weaving into the quiet hum of Grant City. He had only been here 2 months, long enough for the dust to collect in the corners of his small apartment, but not long enough to erase the sharp edges of his old life. He thought of Linda, his ex-wife, and the woman in Memphis, a decision that had splintered everything he knew. He'd become the kind of man he once despised, a man who broke promises, who chased fleeting moments over lasting trust. The thought sat heavy in his stomach, a dull ache beneath his ribs. He punched Hank Miller's number into his phone. Hank, the owner of the hitching rail, had been a steady presence since Dale arrived, offering him shifts behind the bar and a few nights to play his guitar. The phone rang twice before Hank's voice, a gravelly warmth, answered. "Dale, just the man I wanted to talk to. Your songs, people are still talking about them. Kenny Stone was in here last night. You know Kenny? Used to tour a bit himself. He heard you, said you got something real." Hank's words were a balm, a rare moment of affirmation in his unsettled new life. "Kenny Stone?" Dale asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Kenny was a local legend, a musician who'd seen the bigger world before settling back in Grant City. "Yeah, Kenny, he thinks with a little polish, some of those tunes of yours could go somewhere. He thinks he and I could help you finish them up right. What do you say?" Hank's proposal hung in the air. Pride swelled in Dale's chest, quickly followed by a familiar flicker of doubt. Finish them. Did that mean his songs weren't good enough as they were? Still, the possibility of something more, something beyond bartending and playing for tips, pulled at him. "I'd like that, Hank. When do you want to meet?" he replied, the words coming easier than he expected. It felt like a small opening, a crack in the wall of his self-imposed exile, leading to a path he hadn't dared to consider since Memphis. "How about Tuesday? I'll call Kenny. He's usually free that evening." "Sounds good." Dale hung up, a strange mix of hope and apprehension buzzing beneath his skin. This town, quiet as it was, might hold more than he'd bargained for. Later that afternoon, Dale walked the familiar aisles of the grocery store, pushing a squeaky cart. He needed milk, bread, and something easy for dinner. As he reached for a box of cereal, a voice broke through the grocery store hum. "Well, if it isn't the Memphis Troubadour." Dale turned to see Brenda Olson, her red hair bright under the fluorescent lights, a playful smirk on her face. Her eyes, the color of pond water, held a knowing glint. "Brenda," Dale managed, a slight flush rising to his cheeks. She was one of the faces he recognized from his previous life, a connection he hadn't expected to see again. "Heard you were back in town, Dale, playing at the hitching rail. You still sing those sad songs?" she teased, her tone light, but her gaze lingered a moment too long. "Some of them," he admitted, feeling a familiar discomfort. "Just trying to make a living." "Still a bachelor?" she asked, her eyes sweeping over his cart, noticing the single-serving items. "For now," Dale said, a half smile on his face. He felt the pull of her directness, a stark contrast to the careful distance he usually maintained. "Good. My place or yours for dinner tonight? I can cook. Heard you're living pretty bare bones these days." Her invitation, so bold, caught him off guard. He hesitated, picturing his sparse apartment, a worn couch, a few boxes still unopened. "Mine, I guess," he said, a nervous excitement stirring. He wasn't sure why he agreed, but the loneliness of his new life in Grant City sometimes pressed in, an unwelcome weight. "Perfect. What's the address?" she asked, already reaching for her phone. He recited the street name and its number, feeling a curious blend of anticipation and regret. This was new territory, and he wasn't sure he was ready for it. The evening air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of burning leaves as Dale made his way to the high school football game. He liked the ritual of Friday night lights, the way the whole town seemed to gather, a communal heartbeat. He found a spot on the metal bleachers midway up and scanned the crowd. His eyes landed on a woman sitting a few rows down, alone. She had dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she watched the field with an intensity that suggested she was new to this kind of scene. Her jacket, a practical but stylish cut, looked out of place among the faded denim and team hoodies. Dale moved down, taking an empty seat near her. "New in town?" he asked, his voice low. She startled, then turned. Her eyes, a striking shade of blue, met his. "Is it that obvious?" she asked, a small wry smile. "Sarah Jenkins, just moved here from D.C. "Dale Peterson, Grant City native, just back myself," he replied, offering a hand. Her grip was firm. "Your son playing?" he asked, nodding toward the field, where the teams were warming up. "Ethan, number 32, she said, her gaze already back on the field, a flicker of maternal anxiety crossing her features. "He's a linebacker." "Tough position," Dale remarked. "You like Grant City so far?" "It's quiet." "A different pace," Sarah said. "I'm finishing my degree at Chadwick, mostly online. Needed a change for Ethan." Chadwick was the small state college in the next county over. "I bartend at the hitching rail, sometimes play a little music," Dale offered. The game started, a flurry of whistles and shouted encouragement. Ethan, number 32, was a force on the field, a whirlwind of muscle and determination. In the fourth quarter, with the home team down by 3 points, the opposing quarterback broke free, racing toward the end zone. Sarah tensed beside Dale, her knuckles white where she gripped the cold metal bench. Then Ethan, a blur of motion, dove, tackling the runner at the 10-yard line. The crowd erupted. Sarah gasped, her hand instinctively grabbing Dale's arm, her fingers digging in. Her eyes were fixed on the pile of players, fear etched on her face. "He's okay," Dale said, his voice calm, reassuring. He could feel the tremor in her grip. "He's getting up." Sure enough, Ethan slowly rose, dusting himself off, a triumphant grin on his face. Sarah let out a long breath, her shoulders relaxing. Slowly, she removed her hand from his arm, her eyes meeting his in quiet relief. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. When Dale unlocked his apartment door an hour later, the smell of something rich and savory hit him. Tortoise, not the simple sandwiches he'd imagined, but something more substantial, more deliberate. Brenda was already there, in his small kitchen, pulling things from a bag. His place, usually a quiet echo of his own solitude, suddenly felt smaller, filled with a different kind of energy. "Thought you might be hungry for something real," Brenda said, gesturing with a spatula toward the counter. Her eyes swept over his living room, taking in the sparse furniture, the unadorned walls. "Doesn't scream home sweet home, does it, Dale?" she commented, a playful glint in her pond water eyes. The tortas Brenda had made were a welcome change from Dale's usual bachelor fare. They sat across from each other at his small kitchen table, the only table in his apartment, the radio playing a quiet country station. Brenda talked easily, mostly about Grant City and the people they both knew, her voice carrying a warmth that slowly eased the quiet tension Dale usually held. He found himself laughing more than he had in months. She brought out a bottle of dark tequila, and the evening settled into a comfortable haze of conversation and shared drinks. "So Memphis," Brenda said, her eyes, like still water in the dim light, catching his. "That was a whole life, wasn't it? Before Grant City." Her tone was light, but the question beneath it was clear. Dale took a slow sip of his drink. "Long enough," he replied, keeping his voice even. He shifted, running a finger along the rim of his glass, just trying to put down roots again. He wasn't ready to talk about Linda, not with Brenda, not with anyone. The memory of his infidelity still sat raw, a wound that hadn't fully healed. He'd become the man who took things for granted, who broke trust without a second thought, and the guilt still pricked at him. Brenda seemed to sense his unspoken boundary, her expression softening. "I get that," she said, nodding. "New beginnings are good, but sometimes they bring a lot of baggage, too." She didn't push it further, turning the conversation back to a local gossip story, and Dale felt a quiet relief. A few days later, Hank Miller called. "Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, at the Hitching Rail. Kenny and I will be there. We can talk about your songs then." Dale arrived a few minutes early. The bar was empty, save for Hank polishing glasses behind the counter, and Kenny Stone, a man whose face was etched with years of road stories and late nights, sitting at a corner booth. Kenny nodded as Dale approached, a knowing look in his eyes. Dale, good to see you, Hank said, pulling up a chair for him. Kenny's heard your stuff. He sees what I see. Kenny leaned forward. Your songs have a honesty to them, Dale. Not a lot of fluff. People connect with that. We think we can help you get them out there. Maybe even get some tracks laid down. There's an agent in Nashville, a friend of Hank's, might be interested in hearing what you've got. The words hung in the air, solid and real. This wasn't just a friendly suggestion. It was a proposition, a real path. We'd be looking for a share of the publishing, of course, Hank added, his voice matter of fact. Standard stuff. We help you polish. We put in the time. We make the connections. We get a piece of the pie. Dale considered it for a moment. He'd always dreamed of this, but it always felt like a distant fantasy. Now it was a practical matter of percentages and contracts. I understand, he said, a slow nod. Sounds fair. I'm in. A warmth spread through his chest, a sensation he hadn't felt in a long time. It was the feeling of a dream becoming tangible. Over the next few weeks, Dale found himself spending more and more time with Brenda. Their casual dinners at his apartment morphed into something deeper, more frequent. She'd bring groceries, cook, and they'd talk for hours, sharing the small, everyday details of their lives. Brenda, in turn, began to reveal more about herself. She spoke of a failed marriage, a series of relationships that hadn't worked out, always with a resilience that Dale admired. You just keep going, right? She'd say, a shrug of her shoulders. What else are you gonna do? She never dwelled on the past, always looking forward. Her optimism a sharp contrast to Dale's own quiet introspection. One Saturday afternoon, Dale walked through the town park, heading to the small farmer's market. He saw Sarah Jenkins sitting on a bench, watching her son Ethan kick a soccer ball against a tree. Ethan was alone, focused, his movements precise. Hey, Sarah, Dale said, stopping a respectful distance away. She looked up, a faint smile. Dale, good to see you. Ethan's got a good kick, Dale remarked. Sarah sighed, her gaze softening as she watched her son. He's a good kid, just quiet. Hasn't really made many friends since we moved here. It's hard, being the new kid. Dale understood that feeling. It takes time, he offered, a genuine sincerity in his voice. He glanced at Ethan, who had momentarily paused his practice, looking down at his shoes. He seems like he's got his head on straight, though. Sarah offered a grateful smile. He does. Just wish he'd open up a bit more. As they spoke, Ethan retrieved his ball and kicked it toward a nearby goal. Dale called out, Nice shot, Ethan. The boy looked up, a quick, almost imperceptible nod in Dale's direction before returning to his practice. There was a quiet strength in the boy, a self-contained dignity that Dale found himself drawn to. That Friday night, back at the hitching rail, Dale played a new song, one he and Kenny had worked on. It was about starting over, the hesitancy and the hope. The crowd listened, hushed, then erupted in applause. Brenda was there in the front row, her face alight with pride. The sound of the clapping, the buzz of validation filled Dale. He felt a surge of genuine accomplishment, a feeling he hadn't known in years. But beneath it, a quiet unease stirred. Things were moving fast with his music, and with Brenda. He wondered if he was ready for it, if he was building something on solid ground, or if he was simply rushing headlong into another pattern. Later that night, after a few more drinks and the closing of the bar, Brenda went back to his apartment with him. She stayed. In the morning, Dale woke to the soft light filtering through the blinds, the warmth of another body beside him. There was a contentment in that warmth, a sense of not being utterly alone. But as he lay there listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, a familiar shadow crept in. Linda. The choices he'd made, the trust he'd broken, the ghost of her lingered, a quiet reminder that contentment could sometimes be fleeting. Dale found himself falling into a comfortable routine with Brenda. Her laughter filled his small apartment, chasing away the quiet echoes of his past. She had a way of cutting through the silence, of making the ordinary feel a little less lonely. They shared dinners, spent evenings on his worn couch, the hum of the television a background to their easy conversation. Their physical intimacy had become a natural extension of their time together, a warmth that kept the cold realism of his isolated life at bay. Brenda's carefree spirit was a welcome distraction, a bright contrast to the shadows he still carried. Meanwhile, Hank and Kenny were pushing him. They spent hours in the back room of the hitching rail, dissecting his songs, tightening lyrics, refining melodies. Kenny, with his decades of experience, had a knack for finding the raw nerve in a line, for polishing a rough edge without losing its truth. "Don't be afraid to dig deeper, Dale," Kenny would say, leaning back in his chair, eyes closed. "People want to hear what's real, even if it hurts a little." The creative process was both exhilarating and demanding, pushing Dale past his comfort zone. He felt a palpable excitement about his music, a sense of momentum he hadn't known in years. But as his career prospects brightened, the growing intensity of his connection with Brenda felt like a separate, equally strong pull, demanding attention. He still saw Sarah and Ethan around Grant City, at school plays, in the library browsing books, even at the small coffee shop on Main Street. Sarah was always there, a quiet, steady presence, her focus almost entirely on Ethan. She didn't seek attention, didn't make small talk unless prompted. He observed her quiet dedication, the subtle ways she supported her son. She would sometimes share small details, how hard it was balancing her online classes with Ethan's schedule, the everyday struggles of a single mother trying to build a new life in a new town. "Sometimes I feel like I'm always playing catch-up," she admitted one afternoon, during a brief chat outside the school after a parent-teacher conference. Her brow was furrowed, a faint weariness in her blue eyes. "Just trying to keep all the plates spinning." Dale found himself thinking about her earnestness, her quiet strength. Ethan, too, held a certain vulnerability, a quiet boy trying to find his footing. It was a stark contrast to Brenda's vivacity, her ability to fill a room with her presence. He felt a different kind of connection to Sarah, something unspoken, a mutual understanding of struggle. One evening at another football game, Ethan scored a touchdown. The crowd roared. Dale, sitting a few rows behind Sarah, saw her jump to her feet, a genuine, uninhibited joy lighting her face. As she turned to sit back down, her hand accidentally brushed against his arm. It was a fleeting touch, a spark, but it lingered. Their eyes met for a moment, a shared smile. In that brief exchange, Dale felt a subtle shift. There was something genuine in her presence, an authenticity that resonated deep within him, something he hadn't quite acknowledged before. Brenda, however, had begun to talk about their future. "This apartment's getting a little small for just one, isn't it?" she'd say, looking around his living room, a playful glint in her eye that held an underlying seriousness. Or, "My lease is up next month. Maybe it's time for a change." The hints became less subtle, nudging toward commitment, toward moving in, making their relationship more public, more permanent. A pang of unease shot through Dale. He remembered the suffocating feeling of his previous marriage, the weight of expectations, the slow, corrosive slide into betrayal. He saw the pattern beginning to repeat itself, a familiar path he had walked before, leading to the same precipice. He had hurt Linda, had broken her trust, and the thought of repeating that mistake, of falling into the same trap, gnawed at him. He recognized his own capacity for infidelity, his tendency to seek escape when things became too close, too demanding. He started deflecting, using his music as an excuse. "Kenny and Hank are really pushing me right now, Brenda. It's all about the songs. I just need to focus." He kept his voice even, hoping she wouldn't see through his thinly veiled avoidance. He knew it wasn't fair to her, but the thought of moving forward, of making those vows again, felt like stepping into quicksand. Then, one quiet evening, alone with his guitar, a memory resurfaced, sharp and clear. Linda's face, tear-streaked and betrayed, as she threw his suitcase onto the asphalt. The image burned, a reminder of the man he had been, the man he still feared he was. The guilt, a familiar companion, settled in. He picked up his guitar, the wood cool against his hands, and began to pick out a new melody, slow and melancholic. The lyrics that formed in his mind spoke of roads not taken, of burdens carried, and the quiet fear of repeating the same mistakes under a different sky. Dale's music career was moving faster than he'd anticipated. Hank and Kenny had wasted no time. Meetings were set up with a publishing agent in Nashville and even a small independent record label interested in artists with a Midwestern voice. The pressure mounted. Dale spent hours, often late into the night, refining his songs, honing his performances. Every lyric, every chord had to be perfect. His focus narrowed, consuming nearly all his available energy. Brenda, however, had noticed the shift. "So, are we doing this or what, Dale?" she'd ask, her voice edged with a new impatience. "I need to know where I stand. I'm not just waiting around." She wanted to define their relationship, to label it, to solidify it, pushing for answers Dale wasn't ready to give. His evasiveness created a quiet tension between them, leading to small arguments that would often dissolve into uneasy silences. He saw the questions in her eyes, the growing frustration, but he found himself unable to articulate the reasons for his hesitation. Then, a call came from an unfamiliar Memphis number. It was Frank, an old friend from the music scene there. He was just checking in, had heard Dale left town. "Linda's doing okay, by the way," Frank said, almost as an afterthought. "Heard she's seeing someone new." The casual mention of Linda's name, so unexpected, felt like a punch to the gut. The call ignited old guilts, anxieties about the brutal way he'd ended things, the fallout he'd left behind. Linda was moving on, and he was still carrying the baggage. He found himself confiding vaguely in Hank one afternoon while stacking beer bottles in the back room of the hitching rail. "Just some old baggage, Hank," Dale said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Past catching up, you know?" He kept it generic, never mentioning Linda, never revealing the full extent of his infidelity, the real mess he'd created. Hank just grunted, offering a sympathetic nod, too busy to press for details. More and more, Dale found himself drawn to the quiet stability of Sarah and Ethan. He found a kind of refuge there, away from the demands of Brenda, away from the pressure of his music. He would often see Sarah at the local hardware store or at Ethan's school, and he found reasons to extend their brief conversations. One afternoon, Sarah called him. "My kitchen faucet's been leaking for a week," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I've tried everything. Do you know anything about plumbing?" Dale, who was handy enough with basic repairs, offered to take a look. He drove to her small house, a modest but well-kept patio on the edge of town. He spent an hour in her kitchen, wrestling with old pipes, his tools spread across the counter. Sarah sat at her table, working on her laptop, occasionally offering him a glass of water. It was a simple, practical task, a shared moment of domesticity that felt surprisingly grounding. When he finally tightened the last nut, the leak stopped. "Thank you, Dale," Sarah said, her voice genuinely relieved. "I really appreciate it. I'm not good with these things." Her gratitude was open, unpretentious. As he packed his tools, she looked at him, her blue eyes thoughtful. "You seem like you've got a lot on your mind lately," she observed, her tone soft, non-judgmental. "Sometimes it helps just to say it out loud. Doesn't mean you have to fix it. Just acknowledge it." Dale looked at her, surprised by her perceptiveness. She wasn't prying, wasn't demanding, just observing. He felt a sense of peace in her presence, a quiet understanding that didn't require him to explain himself. It was a stark contrast to Brenda's insistent questions, her need for definition. Sarah's empathy was a comfort, a wisdom he hadn't realized he was missing. Brenda, however, was growing increasingly frustrated by Dale's distance. "What is it, Dale?" she asked one night, her voice sharper than usual. "You're always off in your own head. Are you seeing someone else? You're hiding something." Her suspicions, though rooted in his evasiveness, felt like an accusation he couldn't fully deny. Cornered, Dale offered partial truths, vague explanations about the demands of his music, the stress of deadlines. "It's just the pressure, Brenda. This is a big deal for me. I just need space to focus." But even as he spoke the words, he knew he was deepening his web of deceit. He was falling into the same patterns as before, trying to manage multiple relationships, juggling expectations without being truly honest with anyone, least of all himself. The weight of his unspoken meaning, the true messiness of his past, the lies he was telling, began to feel suffocating. It threatened to unravel the fragile new life he was trying to build, brick by painful brick. Dale's music career had moved into a new gear. The agent Hank and Kenny introduced him to had offered a contract, and discussions for demo recordings were underway. The phone calls came daily, filled with talk of publishing splits, touring possibilities, and studio time. It was everything he had ever worked for, a tangible path forward. The excitement should have been overwhelming, a pure, unadulterated joy. Instead, it was overshadowed by a persistent, growing unease in his personal life. Brenda's patience had worn thin. One evening, after a particularly tense silence over dinner, she laid her fork down. "Are we going to keep doing this, Dale?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "Me guessing? You avoiding? I need to know where you stand. What are we doing? Because I can't keep guessing about your commitment." Her eyes searched his, demanding answers he didn't have. He felt the trap tightening, the walls closing in. The truth, raw and unvarnished, was that he didn't know what he wanted. He couldn't face that. Not yet. "Brenda, I do care about you," he stammered, his words feeling hollow even to him. He took a breath, desperation pushing him. "It's just, everything is moving so fast with the music. But yes, I want us to be serious, I do." He made the promise, a hastily constructed bridge over a chasm of doubt, hoping to appease her, to buy himself more time. He saw a flicker of relief in her eyes, mixed with a lingering skepticism. For a moment, the tension eased. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The following afternoon, Dale's phone rang. It was Sarah, her voice tight with suppressed panic. "Dale, it's Ethan. He got into a fight at school. He's got a black eye. They called me from the principal's office." Her voice cracked, a rare display of vulnerability. I don't know what to do." Without a moment's hesitation, Dale was on his feet. "I'm coming," he said, grabbing his keys. "Meet me there." He felt a profound sense of protective care he hadn't anticipated, a sharp urgency to be there for her, for Ethan. He drove fast, the small-town streets blurring past, his mind focused solely on getting to them. He found Sarah in the principal's office, her face pale, her arm around a subdued Ethan. The boy's left eye was already swollen, a bruised purple ring forming. The principal explained the situation, Ethan reacting to some bullying. Dale listened, his hand resting lightly on Ethan's shoulder. He could feel the boy's quiet tremble. As they walked out to Sarah's car, Dale saw Brenda's familiar red car pull into the parking lot. She had been on her way to meet him for a coffee, a peace offering after their strained conversation. Her eyes widened as she saw him, his hand still on Ethan's shoulder. Sarah looking up at him with a gaze of gratitude and shared worry. Brenda's face hardened. Her expression was clear. Alienation and betrayal. Dale tried to explain, walking quickly toward her, leaving Sarah and Ethan by the car. "Brenda, it's not what you think. Ethan got hurt. Sarah called me." His words felt thin, inadequate against the weight of her glare. "Not what I think," she repeated, her voice low and dangerous. "I think you're still lying, Dale, about everything." She turned abruptly, got back into her car, and sped away, leaving him standing there, the gravel crunching under his feet. His explanations rang hollow, even to himself. She was pulling away, and he couldn't blame her. Later that week, Dale was at the hitching rail, nursing a beer after a long practice session, when a familiar face walked in. Mark, an old acquaintance from the Memphis music scene. Dale hadn't seen him in years. Mark, jovial and a little too loud, clapped Dale on the back. "Dale Peterson, long time no see, man. Heard you're making a new life here. Good for you. Last I saw you, things were getting pretty wild back home with Linda. She still talking to you?" Mark laughed, oblivious, and then caught sight of Brenda, who was walking past the booth with a tray of empty glasses. "Oh, hey there, ma'am. You must be Dale's new lady. Just so you know, he's a wild one, always has been." Brenda stopped, her tray rattling slightly. Her eyes, cold and sharp, darted from Mark to Dale. The casual mention of Linda, the wild one comment, the past Dale had so carefully buried, was suddenly laid bare. Mark's words hung in the air, a bell tolling the end of his deception. Brenda looked at Dale, her lips a thin line. The pieces clicked into place for her, the evasions, the distance, the unease. The truth of his past affair with Linda, the real reason he'd left Memphis, began to surface, creating a gaping crack in his carefully constructed new life in Grant City. He saw the realization dawn in her eyes, the understanding of the extent of his deception. Dale felt intense guilt, a chilling fear crawling up his spine. His actions were finally catching up with him. He faced an agonizing choice: continue with Brenda, piling lies upon lies, or confront his past, risk everything, and tear down the fragile existence he'd built here. The consequences were imminent, unavoidable. That night at a small showcase Hank had organized, Dale performed. He played a new song, raw and unpolished, about betrayal and the heavy weight of hidden truths. He poured his inner turmoil into the music, his voice thick with unacknowledged grief and regret. The audience was captivated, hushed, then erupted in applause. But as the sound washed over him, Dale felt deeply hollow, the accolades unable to fill the growing void inside him. Brenda arrived at Dale's apartment the next evening, her face a mask of cold fury. She didn't bother knocking. She just opened the unlocked door. "So you just forgot to mention Linda, did you, Dale?" Her voice was low, trembling with a controlled anger that was more cutting than any shout. "And the whole mess in Memphis? Funny how those details just slipped your mind." Dale stood in the middle of his living room, feeling the air thicken around him. He couldn't deny it, couldn't make excuses. The truth was out. "Brenda, don't you dare, Dale. Don't you dare try to spin it. You lied to me from the start. You're just repeating your patterns, aren't you? Get a new town, a new girl, keep everything secret until it all blows up again." Her eyes, usually so playful, were now sharp, accusatory. "I'm not going to be another Linda, Dale. I'm not that naive." She walked over to his small kitchen table, picked up a framed photo of them from a night out, and smashed it on the floor. The glass shattered, echoing the sound of their relationship breaking apart. "We're done, Dale," she said, her voice shaking now. "Completely done." She walked out, leaving the door ajar, the shards of glass glittering on the floor like scattered promises. Dale stood there for a long time, the silence after her departure heavier than any argument. The immediate consequences of his choices pressed down on him, a physical weight. He was alone again, but this time the solitude felt earned, a self-inflicted wound. News traveled fast in Grant City. Small towns were like that. Within days, whispers about Dale's past infidelity, or at least his suspicious breakup with Brenda, began to circulate. He noticed the looks at the hitching rail, the quick glances, the hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when he entered a room. His blossoming music career, which had felt so promising, now faced a potential setback. Personal life and professional image were rarely separate in a place like this. Hank and Kenny pulled him aside after a practice session. "Heard things, Dale," Hank said, his voice quiet, serious. "Brenda's pretty upset." "What happened?" Kenny just watched him, his expression unreadable, but the subtle questioning of Dale's character hung in the air. "It's complicated," Dale muttered, avoiding their gaze. He couldn't bring himself to explain, to fully confess. He saw their concern, but also a new distance, a wariness that hadn't been there before. He was becoming isolated, even among the people who were trying to help him. He found himself gravitating towards Sarah, not for any romantic reason, but for the genuine comfort he found in her quiet presence, the honesty that didn't demand explanations. He saw her at the grocery store, buying milk and bread, her movements deliberate. He approached her, feeling a desperate need for a connection that wasn't laden with pretense. "Brenda and I broke up," he stated, the words coming out flat. He didn't elaborate, but the quiet tension in his voice was clear. Sarah looked at him, her blue eyes reflecting a mix of sadness and disappointment. "I heard," she said softly. She didn't offer false platitudes. "I'm sorry, Dale, it sounds like a lot." Her honesty, her quiet acknowledgement of the mess, was a stark contrast to the judgment he felt elsewhere. "It's hard, isn't it? When you carry things around, it usually catches up." Her words, so simple, unlocked something in him. For the first time, he felt compelled to truly open up. He told her about Linda, about the affair, about the brutal end to his marriage in Memphis. He spoke of the years of regret, the self-loathing, the shame that had followed him to Grant City. He didn't spare himself, detailing his role in the demise, his weakness, his cowardice. He laid bare his vulnerability, the raw, ugly truth of his moral failings. Sarah listened quietly, attentively. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice. Her reaction was a mix of sadness and understanding, her gaze unwavering, but without immediate judgment. It wasn't absolution, but it was acceptance, a recognition of his humanity, flawed as it was. During this time, Ethan, who often crossed paths with Dale at Sarah's house or at school events, seemed to sense the emotional atmosphere. The boy became more withdrawn, quieter than usual, mirroring the heavy tension that now surrounded Dale. He stopped making eye contact as readily, his usual reserved nature deepening into a quiet retreat. Dale grappled with the full weight of his moral failings. He had hurt Linda, hurt Brenda, and now, even in his attempt to connect with Sarah, he was bringing chaos into her quiet life. He realized that running from his past hadn't meant leaving it behind. It only meant carrying it, like a stone in his pocket, to his present, letting its weight slowly drag him down, leaving a trail of broken trust in its wake. The cold realism of his choices finally settled in. The social repercussions in Grant City were swift and undeniable. The friendly nods from acquaintances turned into hurried, averted gazes. Conversations hushed when Dale entered a room. He walked through town feeling like a ghost, an unwelcome shadow. The gossip, sharp and detailed, spread through the small community like wildfire. He saw it in the eyes of the regulars at the hitching rail, felt it in the polite but distant interactions. Then came the call from his music agent. "Dale, listen, we're going to have to put a hold on things for a bit," the agent said, his voice measured, professional. "This kind of personal drama, it doesn't look good, especially for a new artist. We need to let things cool down." The words hit Dale like a physical blow. His professional dreams, which had seemed so close, so tangible, now hung precariously in the balance. He had sabotaged it all. His new life, his music, everything. A profound sense of loss and isolation settled over him, cold and heavy. He saw Brenda a few weeks later at the town's annual fall festival. She was walking hand in hand with another man, a local mechanic he recognized. Her face, when she caught his eye, held no anger, only a detached indifference. It was clear. Brenda had moved on. There was no chance of reconciliation, not even a glimmer of it. He watched them disappear into the crowd, a knot of regret tightening in his gut. He had tried to apologize a few days after their breakup, a desperate message left on her voicemail. She never called back. He understood. His betrayal had been deep. He spent his evenings in his apartment, the guitar his only steady companion. He poured his remorse, his regret, his self-loathing into his songwriting. The tunes that emerged were deeply melancholic, raw expressions of a man confronting his own brokenness. They were honest, unflinching, the truth of his inner turmoil laid bare in melody and verse. Sarah, however, remained a steady, quiet presence. She didn't offer advice or false comfort, but her compassion was evident in small ways. She would occasionally check in, a brief text asking if he was okay, or a nod of understanding when their paths crossed. He continued to help her with small tasks, a leaky pipe at her house, fixing Ethan's bike chain, always without expectation of anything in return. He wanted to prove his reliability, not just to her, but to himself. Ethan, seeing Dale's consistent, genuine remorse, the quiet way Dale carried himself, slowly started to trust him again. The boy's guard, which had tightened after the breakup, began to ease. He'd offer a shy smile or talk about his school day, small steps that meant a great deal to Dale. One afternoon, Dale had a difficult conversation with Hank and Kenny at the hitching rail. He sat across from them, admitting his mistakes, acknowledging the impact on his career, on their shared venture. "I messed up," he said, his voice raspy. "I hurt Brenda, and I let my personal life spill over. I understand if you guys want to pull back." Hank scratched his chin, his gaze steady. "We're disappointed, Dale. We believed in you, in your music." Kenny, always the quieter of the two, spoke up. "But talent's talent, and what you're writing now, it's real. Raw. You got to get your life in order, though. Nobody wants to work with a train wreck." They didn't abandon him, but their words were a stark warning, a clear delineation of the consequences. They still believed in the music, but they needed him to believe in himself, to fix himself. Dale realized then that true change had to come from within. He couldn't keep running, couldn't keep blaming circumstance. He started attending a local support group for men struggling with accountability and honesty, a small, unassuming gathering in the church basement. He listened to other men share their stories, their struggles, seeing echoes of his own self-destructive patterns. He was trying to understand why he kept repeating these mistakes, why he sabotaged good things. It was a painful process, peeling back layers of self-deception, but it felt necessary. He began to put his own house in order, both literally and figuratively. He cleaned his apartment, fixed the broken photo frame, and started putting up artwork on the barren walls. He bought a new set of sheets, a decent coffee maker. He was making his apartment a real home, a place of peace, not just a temporary refuge. He was trying, slowly, painfully, to build something new, something real from the ground up. Months turned into a season. Dale settled into a more solitary, introspective life. He worked his shifts at the hitching rail, the familiar rhythm of pouring drinks and wiping counters a grounding force. In the quiet hours, he worked on his music, each note, each lyric now imbued with a depth of feeling, born from reflection and hard-won personal growth. His new songs weren't about escape or fleeting desires. They were about accountability, regret, and the slow, arduous path to self-forgiveness. When he played them in the hushed corners of the bar or during open mic nights, they seemed to deeply touch those who listened. A raw honesty resonating through the small room. He finally made the call to Linda. It was a difficult conversation fraught with a past pain and unspoken words. He didn't try to justify himself, didn't make excuses. He simply offered a genuine apology, acknowledging the hurt he'd caused, the trust he'd shattered. He listened as she spoke, her voice still carrying a faint echo of the anger and sorrow he remembered. It wasn't about getting her back, he realized, but about providing a measure of closure, a chance for both of them to finally put down a burden. By the end, a quiet acceptance settled between them. It wasn't forgiveness in the dramatic sense, but a mutual understanding that the past, however painful, could finally be left behind. His friendship with Sarah continued to build, slowly, steadily. It was founded on trust and a shared vulnerability, a quiet understanding that didn't demand explanations. She saw his consistent efforts, his sincere change, and she allowed herself to lean on him more. He would help her with Ethan, offering rides, attending his games, sometimes just being there to listen when she faced the daily challenges of school and single parenting. Dale had become a reliable, positive male figure in Ethan's life, a steady presence the boy clearly appreciated. Ethan, in turn, mirrored Dale's renewed sense of calm, his quiet strength becoming more apparent. One evening after closing the hitching rail, Hank and Kenny sat Dale down. "Your new stuff, Dale," Hank began. "It's got something, it's real, and we've seen you putting in the work on yourself. That counts for something." Kenny nodded. "We pulled some strings. It's not a big label, not a national tour, not yet. But there are some local gigs, some festivals. And we found a small studio in Topeka that'll let you cut some demos independently. Our cut will be smaller too, if you want it." Dale felt a rush of emotion, but this time it was tempered with humility. He had almost lost it all. "I appreciate that, guys," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. He understood that success would now be earned differently, slowly, with integrity. A few weeks later, Dale performed a concert at a small, independent venue in Grant City. The room was packed. He played his new songs, his voice a gravelly testament to his journey. His music resonated deeply with the audience, a few familiar faces among them, including Hank and Kenny, their expressions a mix of pride and relief. In the second row, Sarah sat with Ethan. Sarah's eyes met his, a soft, encouraging smile on her face. Ethan, too, was watching him, a small, proud grin on his bruised face. Their presence was a quiet testament to his journey, a visible manifestation of the trust he had slowly, painstakingly rebuilt. As he played, Dale felt a sense of quiet triumph. It wasn't about fame or accolades, but about the honesty and integrity he was finally bringing to his art and to his life. He recognized that paying the price for his past mistakes meant more than just suffering. It meant actively working towards redemption, day by day, choice by choice. It meant living a life that honored the lessons learned, the trust re-earned. After the performance, as the crowd thinned, Sarah walked over to him. "That was beautiful, Dale," she said, her voice soft, her eyes shining. "Really beautiful." She didn't say anything more, but in the quiet moment shared between them, A warmth grew, a subtle understanding. It hinted at a possible future, not rushed or forced, but built on solid ground, brick by painful brick, forged in the fires of honesty and hard-won truth. Months folded into seasons, marking the slow, steady arc of Dale's new life. His music career, once stalled, began to regain momentum, not with the explosive speed he once craved, but with a quiet, persistent hum. His reputation in Grant City, once tarnished, was rebuilt brick by painful brick, cemented by the strength of his character and the raw honesty of his music. Hank and Kenny, true to their word, continued to arrange gigs, small but meaningful, and the independent demos he'd recorded began to circulate, finding an audience that appreciated their stripped-down truth. His songs, now infused with the wisdom of his past mistakes, the quiet remorse and the fragile hope of a new beginning, found a deeper resonance. They spoke of roads taken and regretted, of the cost of dishonesty, but also of the quiet triumph of finding one's way back. People listened differently now, their eyes holding a knowing understanding. Dale continued his commitment to personal growth. He still attended the support group, his voice a little steadier now when he spoke of his past. He wasn't just there to heal anymore, he was there to offer perspective, using his experiences to help others navigate their own paths of regret and redemption. He became a respected figure in the community, known not just for the haunting melodies he crafted, but for his integrity and the quiet strength he had forged from the ashes of his past. The wary looks were gone, replaced by nods of genuine respect. His relationship with Sarah and Ethan deepened, weaving into the fabric of everyday life. What had begun as friendship, born of shared vulnerability, slowly blossomed into something more profound, a deep, loving bond that felt like the truest family he'd ever known. They shared laughter over dinner, quiet evenings doing homework, and the small, steady comforts of a life built on solid ground. One crisp autumn evening, after Ethan was asleep, Dale sat with Sarah on her porch swing. The air smelled of wood smoke and turning leaves. He didn't have a grand gesture, no dramatic speech. He simply turned to her, his heart open, and offered her the truest part of himself. "Sarah," he began, his voice low, "I know what kind of man I've been. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I'm trying to be better. For me, for Ethan, for us. I want to build a life with you, a real one. Would you marry me?" Sarah looked at him, her blue eyes seeing past the man he was to the man he had become. She recognized the steadfastness, the honesty in his gaze, a profound choice for a love that was steady and real, built not on fleeting passion, but on hard-won truth. She reached out, her hand finding his. "Yes, Dale," she said, a soft smile gracing her lips. "Yes, I will." Their wedding was a quiet affair, held in the small Grant City church with Hank and Kenny as witnesses, and Ethan standing proudly by Dale's side. It wasn't a spectacle, but a reaffirmation of two lives coming together, finding peace in each other. It was a culmination, not of fame or fortune, but of a journey towards authenticity, a testament to the power of second chances and the enduring strength of love. Dale often reflected on his journey, on the crooked path he'd traveled. He acknowledged the pain of his past, the raw wounds he'd inflicted, but also the invaluable lessons learned. He had found a hard-won peace, a stillness in his heart he never thought possible. He understood now that true happiness came not from running or hiding, but from living authentically, even when it meant facing uncomfortable truths, confronting the deepest parts of himself. The lingering echoes of Linda and Brenda no longer haunted him as regrets, but served as poignant reminders of the man he had chosen not to be, the past self he had worked so tirelessly to leave behind. Dale, Sarah, and Ethan stood together, a quiet, resilient family unit, a testament to the enduring power of forgiveness and a love that had been forged in the crucible of hardship. He found a genuine sense of belonging and purpose, having paid the price for his past, and in doing so finally found his own moral compass in the quiet heartland he now called home. He sat on the stage at the hitching rail, the familiar worn wood of his guitar warm against his chest. He looked out at the faces in the crowd, some old, some new, all familiar. He played a new song, a ballad of redemption and hope, his voice clear and true, no longer just telling a story, but living it.